Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Shade Zones Design Competition webinar. We're really excited to have you with us today. We're going to go ahead and get started because this is being recorded. And so people who are not here hopefully can watch later or catch up at another time that's more convenient. So, hello, I'm Monica Dean. I am the Climate and Sustainability Practice Director at USC Dornsife Public Exchange, and we are thrilled to be one of the leads of the Shade LA campaign. Um, we'll go to the next slide. So, Shade LA was recently launched in July, and it is a new effort by USC in collaboration with UCLA to help create a cooler Los Angeles. We're doing this in partnership with the City of Los Angeles, the County of LA, LA Metro, and of course our local Olympic organizing committee, LA 28. And the idea is really how do we leverage this series of major sporting events that are coming to the region over the next few years to think about our public spaces differently, to use them differently, and to help create a lasting benefit for our communities. And the benefit that we have focused on is shade. Um, many reasons that I'm sure many of you are familiar with to focus on shade, but in large part, it's a recognition that we have a legacy and history of urban greening projects for major Olympic moments in Los Angeles. But right now in 2025, it's already hot. And so if we embarked on a major tree planting initiative as we've done in the past, that wouldn't provide the cooling benefits that we want in 2028. And so our new question is really how do we do both? How do we add urban greening to our community while also increasing our resilience through other types of cooling interventions, such as shade structures? And that is in large part what has led us to create this design competition. And next slide. One of the things that we've learned in looking at past major events, such as the Paris Olympic Games in 2024, is that big events require a lot of different types of shade. The different ways that people use space and occupy space and move through the region requires different configurations. And you'll see here up in the upper left, that's one of the watch party locations where community members could come and gather and watch different competitions on a big screen. In the right corner, upper right, was another version of those community watch parties. And you'll see that shade structure is a lot smaller. It's tiny little umbrellas. Is that the right amount of shade? Are enough people being protected? And then in the bottom left is, of course, some of the most common shade structures we see at any event, whether it's the Paris Games or your local Ciclavia or other community tabling event. We often just rely on pop-up tents. And the issue is often that the people who are working there might be under the shade, but everyone else around them doesn't have that access to shade. So a great example is the bus in the bottom right-hand corner, where it's dropping off athletes. I think that's the Australian delegation. And there's no shade. They're about to go on a half-mile walk from that bus drop off into the venue, and they are exposed to the sun the whole way. So as we think about how people will move throughout the region, we wanted to think about how we could do shade a little bit differently. And that's really what inspired this design competition. So next slide. So we were very fortunate in launching Shade LA to have LA Metro as one of our leading partner organizations. They are supporting, of course, games delivery, whether it's LA 28 or any of the other major events. The goal is to make it easy for people to use public transit to get to all of these venues because we've all sat in traffic and no one wants to do that, especially during a major event. And so the idea is really how do we leverage Metro's role to help deliver a safe games? And part of that is to think about how people will move from those Metro facilities to the different venues, whether it's a venue like the Coliseum, or whether it's one of those local community watch party locations, or honestly, if it's even the workers or residents who still need to go about their daily lives throughout these events, how are they all going to get there safely? Next slide. So part of the reason that Metro was really excited about this was because shade is such a crucial aspect of how we keep people not only safe, but how it makes our city more usable and enjoyable. And so we know, for instance, that when we've increased shade at a bus stop, that it increases the likelihood of people using that bus. It makes the wait for that bus more comfortable. It leads to increased foot traffic on streets. So if you think about a main street with good shade, whether it's a tree shade or patios at restaurants with umbrellas, that it increases the likelihood that people are going to wait, linger, enjoy, and hang out in that space. So shade is really this crucial element that often goes underappreciated in how we move throughout our spaces. Next slide. And so with that in mind, Metro has been partnering with Shade LA to not only work on this design competition, but more broadly integrate shade into the work that they are doing throughout the region. And with that in mind, they came to us and really were excited about the opportunity to create a design competition. And I will say that the competition is meant to be an annual competition and in collaboration with our lovely partners at USC School of Architecture. And each year, the competition for Shade Zones will focus on a different theme. So this year, it is being done in partnership with Metro, but next year we hope to have a new topic and maybe a new partner who we'll be working with. So with that, I will hand over to Bhavna to talk a bit about this year's design challenge.
Great. Thank you, Monica. Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavna Sharma. I'm an associate professor in the USC School of Architecture, and I'm the director of building science. I'm happy to talk to you all today about the opportunity to be design advisors as part of our design competition. Again, the competition this year is focused on creating modular temporary shade solutions, specifically looking towards these mega events that we're expecting in the next couple of years, and thinking about real world design cases. So we really want the students to create designs that can be adopted into practice in the future. Next slide. So the design brief is available on the design competition website. So you're more than welcome to look at that. So we've set the teams to have 4 students maximum. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 4 students that will form a team and register to compete in the competition. So you can see some of the core goals that we're looking for in terms of providing shade during peak heat hours, looking at different scales of modularity. So from everywhere from smaller venues to larger areas and plazas, as Monica mentioned. We also want them to consider designs that are actually going to be something that can be assembled by a non-expert, recognizing that community volunteers will be the ones that will be deploying these types of structures during the games. We've incorporated sustainability for students to think about the materials that they're specifying, how will those materials be used, and also what is the end of life of those materials. So making sure they're thinking of a circular lifespan. And then finally, thinking about use in the future after the games, making sure that there's a way to reclaim these materials or apply them in other contexts. And really focusing the students on exploring the leadership that LA has demonstrated regarding climate resilience, as well as design and sustainability. Next slide. So LA Metro is creating a kit of parts. And what we've told the students is that their designs may inform the kit of parts that's eventually designed and deployed for the LA 28 games. So really looking at a modular kit that can be mass produced with different scales, again, going from a small, medium to large scale to fit all of the venues that will be happening within LA County and around the region. Next slide. So these are the scales that we've been talking about. And again, all of this information is available in the design brief. So essentially looking at sidewalks or smaller streets where you might have pedestrians moving from a public transportation stop to a venue, as well as looking at medium scale scenarios where they may close off a larger street intersection, providing shading in these types of areas. And then finally, the large scales looking at these larger plazas, where as Monica mentioned, you might have these viewing parties or other resources for visitors, athletes, as well as reinforcing the fact that these are solutions for our everyday Angelinos, not just looking towards the games and events that we're seeing in the future. Next slide. So coming to what I hope is the focus of today's webinar and your interest in attending today is really the role of the design advisors. This is something that we think is really unique to the competition and a unique digital mentorship model that not all design competitions have had in the past. So the aim is to make access to you as experts more equal across the different schools that are participating. So again, a student can enroll in a competition if they are registered and enrolled at a higher education institution and within LA County. And so part of that is they have to find a faculty advisor that will help mentor them through the process within their own institution. And then they will submit their design in January. So the design advisors and the virtual desk hours is meant to provide access to experts and get their feedback throughout the design process. And so that's a way in which to make it more accessible rather than having students in certain institutions having access to specific firms and getting an unequal opportunity to provide that expert opinion and feedback to their design. So overall, essentially, if you're familiar with office hours or providing support in a studio environment, this is a virtual version of that. So students will sign up for an hour with a firm, and that will be held from October 15th through December 19th. So not all the way up until submission, but a cutoff before the holidays. You'll be able to create a schedule using your own scheduling methods, such as Calendly. And then only registered teams will be able to book an hour with your firm. And essentially, it's a one-on-one session with either 1 to 4 students and to give them feedback and answer questions they might have regarding their design. And so that's the overall model of the virtual desk hours that we're proposing and we're going to execute in this competition this year. Next slide. So part of being involved as a design advisor in the Shade Zones design competition is to give you a chance to interact with these students. Again, they're across LA County, so you might be able to engage with schools and students that you've never thought or considered of before. Thinking about how to inform them about your current challenges in practice and help them to address urgent climate challenges such as extreme heat events. And then again, that equity aspect of the design competition. So making sure that everyone is able to access design firms across the region and participate in these types of mentorship opportunities. And then finally, being able to be included in materials demonstrating that you've contributed to the competition in this way. And so recognition if you opt into competition materials, website, and public exhibitions. Next slide. So overall timeline, we're well into the competition. So again, the design competition and brief were released in August. And that again is available on the Shade LA Shade Zones design competition website. We've had students register, so we already have a number of teams ready to participate. Our registration window closes October 15th. So if you're aware of students that are thinking about registering, make sure that they do that before the registration window closes. Once that window is closed, we'll have our teams that are registered and competing in the competition. And that's when the design advisor desk office hours will start. And so we're going to accept submissions as early as November if the students have completed them, but they're ultimately due by January 15th. So again, that's matching semester schedules across the region as different institutions have different fall schedules. And so making sure that everyone has enough time to create their opportunity to their design. So the jury review will happen from January 16th to the 30th. We'll announce winners in February, and then we'll have a exhibition during Earth Month in April 2026. Next slide. So if you are participating in this webinar and you haven't registered to be a design advisor, you can scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to the Shade LA website, and under design competition, you can register your firm as a design advisor for the competition.
Thanks so much, Bhavna. I'm going to jump in real quick here. Hi, everybody. My name is Max. I'm a project manager at USC Public Exchange, working with Monica and Bhavna on managing the design competition. My role in the competition will be to do a lot of the logistics work. So as folks are hosting their office hours with students, I'm here to help support any logistical questions that come up, as well as provide support to the student teams throughout the competition. I wanted to quickly just bring up that our process for how you all will be offering office hours throughout the semester. It'll look like we're asking folks to contribute an hour minimum per week to office hours. If that poses a challenge for you or your firm, then no worries, we can talk about it. We're flexible on that, but we would love to be able to offer all the teams an opportunity to speak with you all. And we are setting up a private password protected page on the website for students to access office hours and sign up. They'll all get access to that once registration has closed, and then they can sign up on a weekly basis. We're recommending both to the student teams and to you all that you meet with, or you offer the opportunity to meet with a new student team every week rather than continually meeting with the same one, just for the sake of equity and allowing everybody the opportunity to benefit from your excellent expertise. We wanted to set up that system. And so now I think we'll move into the Q&A portion of our presentation. So feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat, and Monica, Bhavna, and I will do our best to answer them.
Maybe to start, Max, you can explain how Calendly works so that people understand how simple it is to set up a booking link.
Yeah, so it's super easy. On Calendly, you just basically, we have a step-by-step guide that we'll be sending out. I'm happy to send it along with the slides after this webinar has closed. And you go in, you add in your availability on a weekly basis. You can also just set that availability to a specific kind of window. Here on the left, you'll see I've basically just selected a 3-hour window between 11:30 and 3:30 on the Thursdays every week. And then people just select that slot and reserve it. We have asked people to submit any materials ahead of that call. So they'll receive a reservation. They can reply to that with any materials that they have to share with you all. And then also they can use this text box to fill in any details that they might need your attention on during that call. And yeah, it's basically that easy. It'll automatically port a event onto your schedule once you hit schedule event. So you should be all good to go. And we have a guide as well, a step-by-step guide. And I'm also here to answer any questions that you all have if any issues come up. But we're trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, or I think you could even potentially raise your hand. If not, I'll just keep sort of prompting other questions with Bhavna and Max. But maybe, Bhavna, can you speak to who can participate as a design advisor?
Sure. There's one question in the chat. Maybe we can go to that person that has their hand raised.
Yeah, great. Siobhan.
Oh, hey there. Yeah, I was just wondering if you all could give a refresher on what the rubric is for the shade evaluation. So I know how I might go into sort of a desk crit one-on-one and give feedback, but we should also probably ethically have our thinking caps on when it comes to how is the jury going to select the winners?
I can take that one. So in the design brief, the specific requirements in terms of thinking about shade, so we're thinking about peak heat hours is described in the brief document, as well as the judging requirements. And so everyone will have different perspectives, obviously, depending on their expertise in this area. But the idea is to be there to answer the students' questions and to be able to support them in thinking about these challenges and how their design solution may or may not meet that challenge. So again, I would refer back to the brief, which Max just put in the chat, and that has more details on what is expected and what the jury will use to evaluate the submissions.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. Sorry, I'll mute myself again. But if you could, I know I have read through the brief, but do you have like, is there going to be like a percentage or a point system, or are we weighting certain things over others?
No, in terms of the jury evaluation, it's as it is stated in the design brief. There's no specific details made available to the students regarding that evaluation. So for example, if I think what you're trying to ask is that if the submission excelled at providing shade, but maybe scored lower in some of the other areas like modularity or thinking about materials, that is not part of the evaluation. It's currently evenly weighted in terms of all of the requirements for the submission and the criteria that it's going to be used, that will be used to evaluate the submissions.
Maybe Bhavna, you can also speak to how that relates to the awards, because there are award categories for excelling maybe at some of those more than others.
Sure. So we have multiple award categories. So categories of excellence, those are the top 3 submissions overall. And then specific awards for things like innovation and sustainability, as well as the fan favorite awards. We're going to do some public voting as well. So if a team doesn't rank in the top 3, but they're really great at sustainability or thinking about this problem innovatively, there's opportunities for them to win those specific awards, as well as being identified as honorable mentions within the overall award category.
And then I know we have some participants here in interest in general in terms of design advisors who specialize more on the fabrication and the feasibility of designs. And so maybe Bhavna, you can speak to that a little bit, which is this is not, necessarily a high concept design competition. The goal is to produce usable concepts that Metro can build into their kit of parts.
Great. So this is going to be the challenge for students. Thank you, Monica, for that. Really great innovative designs, but something that isn't deployable is not going to help support moving this topic forward in terms of the kit of parts that LA Metro is currently working on designing. So really the feasibility and how do the materials come together? How do those materials then get transported to a site and then constructed by, again, non-experts to create the shade structure that's needed for that specific event. So really supporting students and understanding the need for shade and the differences between permanent shade solutions, like some of the images that we showed you, as well as temporary solutions, and then how do those get designed as well as deployed in those specific communities, and thinking about everything from the connection to the materials in terms of how do those get erected in the communities for the games. And so there's a lot of opportunity for you as design advisors to really guide students through this process and help inform their overall design that they end up submitting for the competition.
Great. We're still open for questions if anyone has any other Q&A. Otherwise, I might expand a little bit more on that, Bhavna, and sort of reiterate here. It's in the design brief and you've spoken to it, but at a scale as large as the major events are going to be, it means that shade will be getting deployed throughout LA County, right? There's over 40 different venues alone just for the Olympics themselves. That doesn't include local cities or communities hosting their own watch parties. It doesn't include all of the metro stations. And so what that means is a lot of shade is going to need to get built, especially temporarily to keep people safe and moving as they come to and from the games. And in order to build that amount of shade, we're going to rely on a lot of volunteers. And one of the most exciting things I think I've seen about the Olympics coming is that there's been so much demand by Angelenos to get involved and to volunteer with the games. And so something to keep in mind, again, is it's going to be your neighbor. It's going to be that person you see walking your dog or, at the grocery store who's going to have to be able to build this. And if they struggle with building IKEA, are they going to be able to build this design? And so really think about, that level of detail of how easy would this be to assemble at, from those small locations to those very large locations by volunteers from across the region.
So I can build upon that, just talking about an example for these desk crits. If you're not familiar with that setting, essentially a student comes to you with a particular connection design and they ask you, is that okay? So what you would want to do is ask them to think about the fabrication process for making that connection, how much labor is required, and then also to think about the construction process. And as Monica mentioned, is an expert required? Are there specific tools that are required to create that connection to actually construct the shade structure? So you'd want to ask those types of probing questions to the students to help them think more in detail about their design and think about the reality of what they're proposing so that that can inform their overall design and submission that they create.
And then maybe, Bhavna, you can share a little bit more about these desk crits and how else it's helpful to work with the students so you're not handing them the answers and what you would do, but helping guide them through the thinking of the process.
Sure. So typically students will come to you with ideas. So you really want to help them think through, based on your expertise and experience, how those solutions meet the design brief, and really trying to guide them through the design process and provide them feedback as well as ideas in terms of thinking about a concept more rather than giving them specific direction. And this is, again, part of their education. So we've tried to create a virtual version of what would normally be a desk crit in a studio environment. So again, trying to reduce the burden on individuals like yourselves, being design advisors in terms of traveling to individual schools and meeting with students, and making it more accessible in terms of providing that equity and access to these design advisors as part of the competition. And so really you want to give them a sense of what you think about in practice. And so it's also part of this experiential learning aspect of the competition in terms of they're designing something that is going to actually be created, not their specific design, but their design may inform what ends up being the final kit of parts that is deployed as part of LA28.
Thanks for that. I am not seeing any further questions. And so, with that, I think we will wrap it up. But we've created this lovely web page with additional resources for design advisors. We really appreciate this entire community really coming behind the students and helping support their participation in this competition. Couldn't do it without all of you. And I know just based off of registration and the number of teams we're seeing, we're really excited, and the students are too, about this competition and what it could mean and the lasting benefit it could provide for our community. And so, really appreciate you all contributing to that legacy. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's contact information on this webpage, there's more resources, and we're just an email away. So, with that, I want to thank everybody for your time and hope to see you all at the next Shade Design Zones competition meeting. So, thanks everyone and have a good day.